All right, what's up, guys? Hey, thanks for joining us for another episode of the new Scoreboards podcast, where we talk about kind of my struggle, getting done with athletics and going into business, and kind of all things in regards to that transition, and kind of what we borrow from it, kind of how we leverage our past for the future use, and that's really how this podcast started. So I'm joined by a special guest, Tamron Manning. Always enjoyed talking to a former hooper and basketball player. There's some crossover, but Tamron played basketball at Marshall, looked like 3 years, and then Kentucky Wesleyan, and then on to play overseas professionally a little bit as well before he started his career back in the States. And eventually we're now in the same business, which is the independent insurance agency owner business. So Tamron started Integrity Insurance up there in Lexington, Kentucky. Looks like he's about a year and a half in, crushing it, going through all the fun challenges of starting a business and all the fun wins that come from starting a business, man. So Tamron, appreciate you joining me, man. It's great to have you.
Man, it's a pleasure. I appreciate you having me on. I've been looking forward to chatting with you, man. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah. So you're born and raised in Kentucky.
Yes, I am born and raised in Georgetown, Kentucky. Went to Scott County High School, did my 4 years there, and then I was off to move to West Virginia, which is like a complete different place than Kentucky is, but move into West Virginia and start my college career at Marshall, man, where, we were in the same conference, different times, but same conference for a little bit. So a little bit about the Huntington trips, I'm sure.
Oh, all day, man. Yeah, we would go up there once a year. I would actually played at UCF for 5 years, so I got the privilege of going up there all 5 years. And, I don't know if you know this, but Brett and I, my older brother Brett, who originally introduced Tamron and I, we worked together, but all our family's from Kentucky. We're actually the only part of our family that was born in Florida. And everyone else, mostly Lexington, Kentucky, or surrounding areas. So I do remember my first Huntington trip, and it is different than Florida. I will say that. So in every way, but but yeah, man, that's awesome. What an incredible place to play college basketball. How was that experience, man? How'd you end up at Marshall? I remember going up there, and that was one of actually the tougher places we'd play, especially when the teams were good, which they usually were. That place, they love basketball up there. They'd pack out the arenas, man. How was that experience?
Man, I fell in love with it, man. I was, so in high school, I was actually pretty highly recruited. I was probably, up until my sophomore year of high school, I was probably floating around the top player in the state as a sophomore. And then junior and senior, I really kicked in. So I was pretty highly recruited by a few top high mid-major D1 schools. But when I visited Marshall, man, like you said, that atmosphere, the crowd, it's a sports college town. Like, it's the epitome of what a college town is. The school is located right like downtown Huntington, and everything kind of is encapsulated by the campus. So it was just really nice, man. And I'm honestly, out of all my visits, it was my favorite. And it was where I decided to spend my 3 years. I didn't know it was going to be 3, but it's where I decided to further my education and keep my basketball career rolling. But it was a great course. I enjoyed it, man, like you said.
So who did Donnie Jones recruit you originally from Marshall? Or who was the coach at the time? Was it Tom Herman?
Tom Herring was the coach when I got there. So Donnie Jones had left. I think Donnie Jones was maybe 2 years removed. But I had some Marshall ties coming into Marshall, because 2 of my, not high school teammates, but 2 kind of Scott County, I would say, quote unquote, legends went to Marshall before I went. A.W. Hamilton and Matt Walls both went to Marshall from Scott County. So we had that kind of tie.
I think I played against Walls. Was he the guy who could just shoot lights out?
Yeah, shoot lights out. Yeah, shoot lights out. So it was nice. So I had kind of 2 people I could talk to about Marshall and how it was, and they played for Donnie, so they spoke highly of the campus, highly of the school. So it was a really smooth transition for me coming from where I come from.
That's great, man. I don't know if you know this, but yeah, Donnie Jones, my senior year, he came to UCF, and so I actually got to know him and a couple of the other guys that were at Marshall previously. Um, so it was fun getting to know great guys, great staff, and a really small world. But I remember one of the most hostile environments I've ever played in, that we ever played in, was the year that Donnie came to UCF. It was an in-conference move. A lot of people didn't like it because Marshall had a very good program, and it's like, hey, why are you going to UCF in conference? And man, that trip up there was so hostile, and that crowd was insane up there, and it was a good team too. But anyway, man, that's cool. It's fun to swap those stories, man. So what led you to the last stop, Kentucky Wesleyan, kind of where you finished your career? Is that where you finished your basketball career collegially?
Yeah, that's where I finished up. So the head coach at Kentucky Wesleyan at the time coached a NAIA program in Georgetown, where I grew up my whole life. Like, he was like the main staple, like Georgetown, kind of the Georgetown College is what it's called, but
Yes.
they were like a really big deal in my area at that level. They're winning national championships, doing all this
Yep.
thing. He was the mainstay. And he was like the first coach to ever even like put I don't know, just like speak to me and like talk to me about college and stuff. He wanted to get in when I was super young, of course, because he knew where I was headed. But he did that. He did that with kids around the state that had higher aspirations than the level that Georgetown was. But he did it in a sense of, he knew like if something went wrong or if you just became unhappy somewhere, it was a great landing spot to be. So he did that with me. And during my Marshall career, we had a coaching change, and I just decided to transfer my last year and finish out somewhere else, since I didn't come in under that staff, which is another whole other basketball story. Yeah. So once I did that, it was an easy switch. I wanted to play right away. And this was the time, I'm not old, I'm 28 years old, but this was a time to where there was no transfer portal like it is now.
Yeah.
You transfer, you had to sit out a year, especially when you transfer D1 to D1. So I was like, man, I really don't want to sit out a year and have to push back my graduation and all that. So I decided to transfer to the D2 level at Kentucky Wesleyan, which at the time was a big D2 powerhouse. So it ended up working out, and that's kind of how I got shifted to there and graduated from there.
Yeah. And then you have the opportunity. I saw that. Did you go overseas? You play in Ireland for a little bit?
Yeah, man. I spent 3 years in Ireland before coming back home and staying home. But yeah, I spent 3 years in Ireland. I did a couple kind of hired gun positions in a couple other countries, but Ireland was like my mainstay. Lived there, it was incredible just getting engulfed in a different culture. I think I'd only left the country maybe twice before then, which I'd advise everybody, all your listeners, if you have the opportunity to leave the country for any amount of time, definitely advise you to do it. But yeah, spent 3 years in Ireland, working my butt off, and I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. So when I got there, I needed something to do the other 20 hours of the day that wasn't practice or training and all that stuff. So I decided to get my master's in marketing because I always, even when I was a kid, I wanted to own a business. I just thought the business owner life looked cool from like a kid's perspective. So I was already on that kind of on that type of mindset. So I got my MBA in marketing because I knew if you want to own a business, you better be a good marketer. So I went that route, man, and I just took full advantage of my time there. And it was a free education again. So it was definitely a great opportunity for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. When you talk about the transition, I do want to speak to, if you're listening, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, I think we can learn a lot from you. And that jump is to say you went over there and you're still playing basketball, but it seemed like your mind knew that, okay, this is going to end at some point. I want to equip myself with some skills, some tools. And so I didn't know that you're able to go to school while you're still playing. And then you come back. Was there an injury? Was there, hey, my body's not holding up? What was that final moment like? And had that end up being the end?
Man, this is so it's not really a crazy story. I actually had a child. So I had a daughter in 2018. And I went back and I was like, man, this is kind of tough. Like,
Yeah.
if for people who have kids, that like 0 to like 8 month stage, like they do so much, and they can kind of, you could miss a lot in that like
Mm.
that stage. So I was like, I don't really want to I never wanted to be that dad or that person to put their career over their kids, and their kids like missed out on time and stuff. So I was like, let me just come back home. Maybe this is just God's way of saying, hey, it's time to hang up the shoes professionally and try to figure your business life out. You've always wanted to do something in business. So now is that time. So I always thank my daughter. She's 5 now. So I always thank her
Yeah.
for creating my business life. Because I mean, if it wasn't for her, I don't know where the heck I'd be living or doing or anything. So she kind of got my business life completely started.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I have an almost 4-year-old daughter, so I can totally relate to the phase that you're talking about, and why you'd have a really strong reason to do what you're doing now or come back and start a life, back in Kentucky. So, well, why'd you get into what you're doing, man? You come back, obviously you knew you liked business. I totally agree with you. I think marketing is a huge part about starting a small business. I know, some early advice that I got from a mentors of mine was just like, hey man, these gigs early on, it's just marketing. I mean, it really is about going out and meeting people, letting your market consistently know about what you do, over and over and over again. So I do think you're wise in that regard. I think you have it in the proper order. But why'd you get into what you were doing in the insurance business? What exposed you? Was it a mentor? Was it somebody you looked at and said, hey, I see this and I like this, or why insurance?
Well, taking a couple steps back, when I first got, honestly, when I just first got of age to know just about business, or maybe like high school level, probably around like my high school age, I just always, man, I just wanted to own something. Like my big dream was to like make enough money playing basketball to like open a gym. Like I had all these like different dreams of wanting to own a business. And honestly, insurance was something I fell into. So when I got back from Ireland, a buddy of mine owned a Allstate agency, and he's like, man, I have an open role for a producer. I think you have the personality to be a pretty good producer. So I jumped in. I ended up doing really well at it. And then I also, like I said, I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. I knew the pathway to opening my own agency was possible if I wanted to go that route. And I knew that was a possibility. So I was like, let me just learn as much as I can. So I was working, I guess 9 to 5 or whatever the hours were. And then after hours, I was just studying, man. I was just looking up like how this person started their insurance agency. I was looking up Captive because I was at Allstate, which Captive is like Allstate, State Farm, all that stuff. I was looking up Captive options. Then I found out about the independent space, which I had no clue about the independent space because I'm coming, like I said, I'm probably like 25, 26. So I'm still on my parents' insurance at the time. So I have no clue
Dude,
about
same.
what independent is, captive is. So I'm just like, man, I'm going to open an Allstate. It's going to be great. But then I realized, oh, there's another avenue where I can really kind of put my flag in the sand and really make a mark in the industry if I shift my mindset to being independent. So I got into insurance by accident, but it was something, man, I'm so grateful that I found the industry because it's an industry, man, that I'm just super excited about, especially at where I am now. I can just kind of see the trajectory and where we're going. So I'm super excited about the industry that I fell into.
Yeah, I've enjoyed following on LinkedIn and just watching your story unfold. But yeah, it's so funny. Similar stories with me. I was, the open to business, and I was still on my parents' auto insurance policy. Knew very, very little about it. Which is fun. So, but hey, so you go from being an employee, right? Being a producer, were you commission only? Were you on? Did you have a base? Like obviously that level of risk to go out and start your own agency and start your own business. I don't think. I mean, obviously, I think you skipped over it because you've always had a passion for it and you knew you wanted it. But man, that's nothing to jump over. Like why was that tough? Was that a decision you mulled over, or were you just like, hey, intuitively I'm listening and I just believe that this is the right thing for me? And what have you learned so far in the first year and a half that maybe you thought that you didn't know about before you started?
Man, honestly, to answer the first one, as far as just my salary pay wise, I had a small base as a producer, small base salary. But I mean, obviously, you don't make any money unless you sell stuff. So I was high commission, but very small base, not enough to where you could just come in and kick your feet up, not that
Sure.
kind of salary, but definitely a little small base. But man, honestly, I think what's kind of helped me make that leap and make that jump is I'm not doing it for the financial reasons. I think I was talking to your brother about this actually, but just about how you have to be able to delay that gratification and really understand the difference between like what a lot of money looks like to you now and what it could look like if you invest and really try to build a business that creates a big cash flow. So that's kind of always been my mindset. And I was just able to just have a scarcity mentality as far as I can put off some things. I don't have to buy all these different things right now. As long as my mortgage is paid, or at that time the rent was paid, I can put gas in my truck, I was good. So I was able to kind of do that and just make sure I had all my necessities handled. But as far as like missing out on the salary and missing out on all that, I was super okay with. And I feel like those are kind of the more successful business owners' story. I feel like the people who take all the money out of the business, I mean, they end up with no money left. So that was kind of my mindset: is I can delay gratification enough to where I can see the vision being bigger than where I am right now.
Damn, that's gold, man. I look at like 20. So you started your business and you were probably what, 26, 27, something like that, or
27. I was 27.
which is incredible. But I don't know, man. Some people have different philosophies about this. I know I certainly borrowed more of your mentality where, we had some people that when we were starting the business was like, hey man, you don't want to start the business now. You want to make some money working for somebody else. And, maybe 10, 20 years down the road after you have money or you've done well, then go start a business. Right. And I was like, interesting, because we did the opposite, and then I look at it and go like, man, I wouldn't do it any other way, because one, it's just like the scrappy, willing to invest, delay gratification, build something worth building. There's something to that creates some magic, as opposed to, go make some money, get used to living a certain lifestyle, and then now you don't want to take a step back from that lifestyle kind of mentality, right? And most people, that's what prevents them from doing stuff, right? Is they don't. I hear that all the time, like, you hire people, we hire people, and one of the biggest things you hear somebody say right after they tell you that they want to grow and they want to find a place to grow, then they'll come in and say, but I don't want to take a step back. And you really have to delve into what does that mean, take a step back, right? Does that mean just from a baseline what you put on your W-2? Does that mean what does that mean? And would you be willing to take a step back on your W-2 to 2-3 years later be able to triple what that is, or and triple maybe not even what you're making, but from a lifestyle perspective, all the different needs of people. So sometimes it's interesting how us as humans, like, we want to grow and we want to build, but sometimes there's a disconnect of what it takes to grow and what it takes to build, and sometimes that is uncomfortable. Sometimes that means that you're delaying gratification way longer than you thought you would. So that's a really, really good point. I just applaud you. I think the 20s is a magical, if you can get the right mentorship and you can start something in your 20s that you love and that you're willing to work, man, the other side of 30, I always tell people that, like, really young people getting out of college and stuff like that, like, man, like, if you find out something you want to do in your 20s and work really hard on it, if it's a good vehicle, the other side of 30 looks really good. Like, and I know your business, right? I know the insurance business, and it's one of those businesses. It sucks at first, man. Like, personal lines, property and casualty is very challenging at first. Low price point, a lot of volume needed. You got to hire, you got to do a lot of stuff. And at first it just takes the right person to move that big boulder. But man, once you get that boulder moving, the other side of 30 looks pretty sweet from the things that you say you value, right? You mentioned time with your daughter, you mentioned, owning something for yourself, and you mentioned cash flow and stuff like that. So I can just appreciate that sentiment. I do want to ask you though, too, the marketing mindset. What else have you found out in the first year and a half that maybe were you thought it was one way going in, and then and now a year and a half in, you're like, man, I learned that along this way as far as being a business owner and entrepreneur?
Man, I would say the biggest lessons I've learned are less business owner lessons and more insurance lessons. I never realized, honestly, how much people need their insurance agent. I would say that was something I didn't really plan for when I did my marketing plan, because I feel like business wise, like I said, man, I'm a nerd when it comes to business itself, like the building of businesses, just businesses itself. So understanding what you need to look at, cash flow, revenue, all that kind of
Yep.
stuff. I'm pretty nerdy about, and I watch a lot of YouTube videos of successful business owners. But the insurance side is something that I was not a nerd about until obviously I opened my own business. But prior to that, I just was like, man, you just sell policies, you take care of people, and you let the policies auto renew, and you're good to go. But people really need you in the course of their 6 month to 1 year policy term. I mean, people are trying to change vehicles, get ID cards, just the little changes they need. So I didn't estimate how much the phone would be ringing with my current customers. And I was like, once you sell them, they'll be good. You don't got to deal with them. But I
Yeah.
was coming from Allstate to where you didn't do a lot of service because they have a service center for all the stuff. So that's why I was like kind of missing the boat on, oh, you really have to like earn the renewal. Like it's not something that just auto renews. You have to really like make sure the client is taken care of in between the sale and that little like that white space in between that and the end date. That's where you really earn the renewal. So that's where I kind of had to learn and get better at, which isn't my strength, honestly. I'm a salesman and a
Yeah.
marketer.
You want to be
Which
out
is
and
why
about
I'm
meeting
hiring,
people.
yeah, which is why I'm hiring. Like I
There
spoke
you
to you
go.
about, but that's why I'm hiring somebody who's better than me at that. And just like those intangible skills, man, just to understand that I'm not good at that and to be able to bring somebody in who potentially is good at that. So that was kind of the biggest lesson I've learned so far.
No, that's wise, man. I dig that, and I can't help but look at that little basketball hoop on your door, because I'm looking at our office and I see that the same basketball hoop. If I could turn the camera, you'd see it. So that's hilarious. That is not on accident, but that's
No, no.
that never goes away. You need a little space in the day to shoot around a little bit, man. So how about, man? I probably skipped over this, but I know for me, like when I finished playing, I immediately, I don't know, like there was almost like that obsession with the thing, like for me with basketball for so long. And I didn't love everything about basketball, right? You know that, playing at the level you played at. I mean, there's most days you don't feel great. And once you
Right.
get to a certain level, you start having, whether it's a back, it's an ankle, it's a shoulder, it's different than when you're playing as a kid and you could play 4 games in a day and then play 3 the next day in AAU, right? So a part of that for me, there was kind of like this natural evolution of transitioning away from sport where but then I got into business, and I kind of took that same mentality you did, maybe in a different way, just like took that little bit of an obsession about business and the craft and kind of dumped that energy in there. But one of the reasons I started this podcast is the feedback wasn't as immediate, right? Like it was just like, hey, like, am I doing a good job? I always joke with a friend of mine that similar experience is like, hey, I would kill for a film session, man. If coach would watch me make some calls and we could go on some marketing visits together and he could break down on film, what I'm doing wrong and what I could do better. Like I could really use the feedback of whether I'm winning or not, right? Like, am I winning? Am I doing what is required with win? I miss that objectivity that, like, at the end of the drill or at the end of the game or at the end of the practice, like, hey, I won. And that doesn't mean I don't have anything to work on, but at the end of the day, you're competing to win that possession, that drill. How was that for you when you transitioned and you hung it up and you moved back from Ireland to Kentucky? And Was that something that was natural transition? Did it take you a while? Do you still play? Like, how do you deal with that, man?
Man, that's a really good question. I think it's an ongoing battle. And I think it's different. I think it always kind of depends, and this is me speaking, I guess kind of for myself, but I think it depends on why you stopped. I think that is a big help. So if you stop because you just had a gruesome injury and you can't get back, that's one thing. I think for me stopping for my daughter, which obviously love my daughter and I do anything to take care of her. But for me, stopping for that reason and still being healthy enough to compete at that same level, because it was literally just 1 year prior. So it was like I was at that level 1 year ago at that time. So knowing that, man, it was really hard. I will be completely honest. It was really hard for me to kind of transition into something else other than basketball, because it felt like, I don't know, in my mind, I guess it felt like a letdown, because I did all that work from, like, I guess you say 2 years old, but you really start working, when you're in middle school and you like kind of figure out, wait, I can really be good at this. Cause I was one of those kids that always had the potential to be really good. I was tall. I had this brain of just like, I understood all the sports. Like I just could jump into a football game and be good, and like good plays would happen for me, like kind of naturally. But I was growing quicker than my mind was growing, so I was still kind of awkward. But going into middle school, man, I really started putting things together and seeing that I was better than a lot of people. And I was like, well, this is something I can really do. So when I got that in me, that I was better than a lot of people, I just wanted to work at the sport as much as I could to get as good as I felt like I could be. And it transitioned over to business, which I'll get to that. But in the basketball realm, I was just in a space to where I was very hyper-focused on just getting better, getting training, getting in the gym, doing everything I got to do to be a professional. Because in middle school, high school, I'm still thinking that, hey, I could play in the NBA. I was still having those kind of thoughts because I was kind of on that path. Like I said, I was the best in my state. When you realize like there's only 50 states, so you just start breaking down.
And it's Kentucky. It's Kentucky, so it's not a bad basketball state.
Yeah, it's a basketball state, and you're going to play AAU tournaments, and you're playing against guys, which looking back now, some of those guys are in the NBA, but you're playing against these guys, and you're like, man, I'm competing like right at that same level, and it's just all about kind of how much work I can keep putting it in. So at that point, man, I'm so just hyper focused on that. And I finally get to a position to where I am at least a professional, maybe not an NBA, but I am getting paid to play the sport that I've just kind of put all my eggs into that basket, I guess to say. And then it just stopped. It was just like like I said, I don't know if it was just like God telling me, hey, you need to make this transition or this shift. But it just stopped abruptly. And it was really hard for me, probably the first 2 years. And honestly, it's still kind of hard. But those first 2 years were really tough. And I would just always look back to college and just feel like, man, I should have just like paid attention in math a little more, paid attention in accounting a bit more, but you just have I don't know, as kids, we just grow up and we have no sense of the future. I feel like the kids that do have the sense of the future are ahead. But for me, I was just so like, I'm going to play basketball forever. Like this is like, when I quit, I'm going to be old and I've made enough money to where I can retire and be good. That was my thought. So I didn't really have that plan B. So for me, man, I don't know, you can speak as well for yourself, but for me, it was tough, man. I just remember being kind of stressed and depressed, and you just don't know what you're good at. I think that's the biggest issue with sports. Now that I have children, I'm going to try to help them just do everything. Like, I want you to play a piano, like just do as much as you can. Cause I was at the point where I was like, I don't really know what I would be good at next to kind of transition into. Like sales kind of was natural, just cause I've kind of sold myself with recruiting and talking to people, meeting people playing sports. So that kind of helped. And it's more of a natural skill, I guess, more so than something I grew. But that was the hardest part, man, is just not understanding what I was good at, because you put probably all your time into one thing, and you just don't develop your other intangible skills that you need to succeed in business. So I would say that was my hardest thing.
Man, that is so well said. And I think the part of that I think people can relate to, at least the friends of mine that have gone through that, is that I don't know what I'm going to be good at. Like, I totally relate, right? Like, hey, I've been doing this and I know I've gotten good at this, but I have no idea what, I remember the first time I really worked a normal quote unquote job. I had an internship. Like, I had to have an internship to graduate. And I was similar. Like, I did okay at school, but it was never a focus of mine. It was always just to really get by. It was always just like, hey, just keep your grades above a 3.0 if you can. And then hey, oh, you have to have an internship to graduate. Perfect. Okay, I'll do that. Oh, by the way, you don't have enough credits towards your major. Okay, well, what do I have so I can keep playing? Okay, perfect. I'll switch to that major. It was never like a focus of mine of like, hey, I'm doing this strategically so it helps my next career, or I'm getting this internship or networking with these people so it helps my career. It was always just like, okay, I'm at the end of the road. I know it's over, but I am scared to death because I don't know what I would be good at. I don't know what is valuable in the marketplace. I feel like I've kind of only operated in this space, and I think people, like, there's good student athlete committees, and you kind of hear throughout, at least I heard throughout my career, that hey, employers value student athletes, and you kind of have this narrative that plays about the discipline of an athlete and the ability to show up and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I had a pretty deep insecurity about like what was next for me. And then a little bit of that, like a part of that was like, hey, you're going from somebody to nobody overnight, and whether that was just a perception or my ego, like in my mind, I was like, man, I'm valued. I have value here. And then I have no value here, and I have to work to create value. And I guess there's some true to that in the marketplace, but it was totally scary. And the thought of like, I don't know what I'm good at is so relevant. And that's honestly one of the reasons I really enjoy doing this, because you mentioned, how you wanted to equip your kids. I can totally relate, but I want to equip, current athletes or future current athletes, or even people that are past that phase and they're still asking themselves, I don't know what I'm good at. Like, they still haven't found that thing that they can put the energy into to kind of have that level of competence to delve into it. Like, one of the things you mentioned that I focused on is it's interesting how once you found out that you were pretty good, like basically like once the light switch on, that goes, hey, actually, I'm pretty, like, I could be really good.
Yeah.
Then it's like you basically, because I have this thing, it's like I think people are trading, like they're making the trade every single day of whether something's worth it or not. Like they have this abundance of energy, right? And they're looking at a thing, or they're looking at a job, or looking at a task, or the next phone call, or the next drill, and they're going, man, is this worth it? Like, and if it's worth it, I'll flat out lay out for it. But if it's not worth it, like, yeah, all right, maybe I'll do it, maybe I'll complete it, but man, if you get that glimpse that it's worth it, if you have a clear enough picture that it's worth it and this is what is required, okay, that's a different level of commitment that you're going to go to. And it sounds like you went that way in your career for basketball, and it sounds like you're going that way in your career as an entrepreneur. And it's funny, just to give you feedback, because we're in the same business, is like, dude, you're better than most agents. Like, you're better than most agency owners. I mean, there's some really, really good ones in our space, but man, your trajectory and your ceiling is about as high as they come, man. So hopefully that's just a little bit of encouragement of the glimpse of how quality of a business that you will build. And I know you know that, but anyway, it's just cool insight. I appreciate you sharing that.
I did want to say, not to take you off your focus, but going back to college, and you come from a big, which I'm sure your listeners know, but you come from like a big, it's not a normal size school, UCF. So if you could go back and knowing that, hey, I'm not going to be playing basketball forever, and me and my brother in the future will open an insurance agency, all the people you met at UCF, could you imagine like really networking with them in a true sense of just like, this is what I'm going to do, this, and how much help they would have offered you just in that little time that you was at UCF, just like a school full of great alumni, I'm assuming. I can imagine just the great alumni that come from there.
Guys, totally right. I mean, and you think about sports in general. Around sports, there are very successful people because naturally they enjoy sport. We enjoy sport as people, but then like a lot of these people make a lot of money, and then they want to come be around athletics and be a part of something. So the way they do that is they, become a booster and they become more involved and they feel like they're a part of the program. It's you're right. It's like this big pool of people that have already done what you hope to do. And in hindsight, you would get to pick and choose the things that you value, that you deem successful. And then you could just model or borrow from those people. No, you're totally right. Even if you didn't know what space you were going to get into, if like you walk in your freshman year and you had an electronic note card and you said, okay, Tamron Manning, perfect. He does insurance integrity, started it. Here's his phone number. I'm going to keep in touch with him. And just once a year, I'm going to reach out to him, see if I can grab coffee and just stay in relationship with this person. And when I graduate, like it would be crazy, right? Like
that's one of my biggest regrets, man, is just all the networking. Because you do it. Like we did those little golf things.
Yes.
Like in West Virginia, we have the Greenbrier, which is where
Yep.
it's part of the PGA Tour. It's a stop. So we had to work it one year. There's a lot of boosters there. And man, you're just there as a 18-year-old. You're like, man, I just want to get back to the dorm or
No
go
doubt.
to the calf, or like, why do we got to be here? It's just
calf.
Like,
yeah.
you just don't have, and it's natural, but you just don't have that brain capacity to know, like, this is a great event that they're letting us be a part of, and all these people are interested in us. Like that's the main reason they're here.
You're a celebrity
in you, and you just don't. Not that you don't care, but you just don't have the wherewithal to know, let me just meet people, talk to them, introduce myself. If they're like, man, this guy, he's well-spoken, he speaks, yes. They'll watch you throughout your growth there. And they'll be like, they might have offered you a job or like gave you an opportunity. And just like so many different things that I wish I could go back and kind of just do or put more effort into, just to show myself more. Because most people knew me there as just the basketball player. But I think if they would have knew my mind as it is now, I think they would have been like, man, that kid, I could have did a lot with certain people and did certain. So that's probably one of my biggest college regrets, is just being, not just being a kid,
being in college.
Just being
in college. Yeah,
like,
that's and isn't that the perspective that I'm sure that we all look back at, and people older than us look back, well, I wish I would have done this. How about this? I wish I would have started a business in my 20s, right? So, you're doing right now what most probably look back and go, I mean, I hear that all the time. I hear all the time people that have done even really well in their career. And they look back and I wish I would have done. Oh, you hear it all day long. And then a part of me, I get cynical. I'm like, yeah, but do you? Because, you didn't really mean that, because you weren't willing to put in that decade of delayed gratification. So, but yeah, you just said something that really triggered for me, is like, we're talking about an experience that we went through that you have people's attention. They care about you. You have people that are really like, their whole framework is to make you successful, like even like study hall. And we have people that walked us to class, not me, because no one cared about me, but like, the other players who walked to class and stuff. And you're like, man, like, think about that in hindsight. Like, that's crazy to me, how many resources that you have around you, if you're able to have the perspective of those resources. You actually put a LinkedIn post about taking, like giving and investing versus taking. And I felt like that sometimes in the locker room, there was just clearly guys that like, they just took, like, they were just like entitled to the fact that all these resources are what they deserve. And then to me, some of those guys like really struggle after sports, because there's not anybody that is walking you to class, man. Like there's not anybody that really cares like that, in that way. And so that sense of entitlement like really hurts you after sports. So one of the things, Ed Milet said, if you listen to Ed Milet, he's an incredible podcast and obviously one of the top speakers in the world, but very, very successful. And he talks about how we're most equipped to help the people that we once were. And what you just said is going to help a lot of people, because you've been through that and you're looking back in hindsight and you're able to contribute counsel that's specific to that experience, right? And speak to somebody that says, hey bro, I know you think you're good and you're a freshman and you're coming into school. you can do both. You can be really good and focus on your sport, but you can also just pay attention a little bit more, on the networking side, that kind of thing is incredible hindsight.
Integrate yourself, man. Be there, be present, I think is the biggest thing. Like you said, people get so like, this is supposed to happen to me. I'm supposed to have a tutor. I'm supposed to get help with XYZ. But if you can just integrate yourself, man, and like talk to the person next to you in math class or whatever, just like have a normal conversation with them, like that kind of stuff, man, is little opportunities. I feel like athletes especially miss. You're just so focused on your core group, your teammates, maybe another sports team that you like, but you just miss out on the connections, man. Like I just think back to my school. I know a lot of CEOs came from Marshall, especially in my time being there, and I know how big UCF is. So when they walk you all to class, they had to, I'm assuming, take a golf cart and drop people off. I just know, visited every time we went there. I was like, man, I can't wait to go to UCF. But a big place, when you all left the conference, we got FAU in Florida International, which two great spots in Florida as well. Boca Raton and FIU are still.
Yeah. It's funny, man, full circle when you're talking about starting the insurance business. When we decided to incorporate, I was on the phone with my brother, and I was in a Huntington, West Virginia hotel room, and we were gearing up to play. It was a conference game, so I think it was probably mid to late January. And I remember making the decision that yes, we're doing this right there in Huntington, West Virginia, right before we played Marshall. That was my 5th year. And I was kind of on my way out, to say the least. My focus started straying away from sports early on, and in that senior year when reality was starting to set in a little bit more than I'd like to admit. So it's funny, kind of full circle, those moments and that's another thing that I think is cool from college athletics, depending on what level, or it doesn't really matter, but you get to travel like to these places that you would never go. Like I can't say that I would go to Huntington, West Virginia and go play Marshall, right? Like, or go to a game, or go to Nebraska or South Dakota and Albuquerque, New Mexico, and all these different parts of the United States. Yeah.
You'd have never got that experience, man. Like going to those Texas trips, which I keep remembering you were in that conference too, but going through those Texas trips, man, it's like a whole different.
You go to El Paso?
Texas is a different country. It's like a different place than like America to me. It's like a whole different, even San Antonio and like El Paso, just going to these different places, man. It's just like, you won't get those experiences without the sport. That's why I'm always so grateful. I coach it now at our local high school. I'm just so, this is
what high school, man?
I coach at, so I don't coach at the high school I went to. So I went to, like I said, Scott County High School, and it was the only school in the county for as long as I can remember. And then they finally split into 2. So I coach at the other one now, but that was a big deal in our areas. They finally split to 2 because we were a powerhouse, but it helped. It was a big county, and only all the kids went to one school. So it was a monster for like a 30-year run. So it ended up splitting up. So I coach at that school, and I just try to pour into the kids, doing what we talk about, just kind of open their eyes to the other stuff other than sports, and let them know you get out what you put in even after sports. It's not only a sports synonym, I guess. It works for life after sports, and there is a life after sports. So I just am blessed enough to be able to coach them and be around them.
Dude, what a cool outlet to be able to really give, and just things that you've learned along the way to just like you're going to make such a difference, and you're already making such a difference in those kids' lives. I look back, and some of the best moments are a coach pulling me aside, even it's a tough moment, and there's lessons, and there's these quotes. There's just, I remember I had this great coach who was now become very successful, played a little bit in the NBA, but he's been just like an incredibly successful business guy. And I remember him pulling me aside at like 10 years old. And he's like, hey man, your attitude's just not cutting it. He's like, the 2 things you can control in life are your attitude and your effort. And if those are, at a high level, then, you can make it, then you can do something, you can be on this team. But if you don't change your attitude, you're not going to be on, it's like, and I remember that moment. And I talk about that a lot, even when, in business or we hire somebody, it's just attitude and effort. And that came from a coach just like pulling me aside in a moment and teaching me a lesson that's valuable. And coaches just are incredible in the way that they can shape the trajectory of a young person's life. It's amazing. And it truly is. So, I mean, does that help scratch the itch, by the way? Does coaching basketball feel a little bit like, scratching that itch, or does it make you want to kind of go show those kids how good you were?
Oh man, I wouldn't say it scratches the itch completely. It does its job. I never answered your one question about still playing. So when I first stopped, I was man, like I said, I was just so stressed and kind of depressed. I was just like, man, I don't even want to look at a basketball. So I
Yeah.
stopped playing. At that time, I had got back into playing, just kind of rec and just having fun with it. So I was able to scratch the itch that way. And now I'm leaning into the golf lane.
Let's
But
go.
like I have that obsessive personality with things that I pick up. So it's like once I pick up golf, man, I'm gonna be golfing every weekend, spending all my extra money on golf. And it's just like I want new gloves, I want to get a new I'm like, dude, you can't do that. Focus on this. I'm like, let me just keep building my business. I'll play every now and then, but like, if you don't play consistently, you're not going to be good. But that's kind of where I'm kind of shifting into golf. But I can never just put a basketball down completely. I just don't have the excuse, man. Like I said, I'm 28. I can't stop.
Yeah.
I'm pretty healthy. I still work out, so it's like I can't just not play basketball.
Yeah, especially if you're coaching, you're around it. I mean, it's got to be like you get a ball in your hand, you know what to do with it. It's just,
Oh yeah,
it feels good. Actually, like my kid's daycare has a gym in it, so like I'll go there like 20 minutes early to pick them up, and I'll just shoot around, and it's like it's heaven for me. It's like the most therapeutic, thing that I could possibly do is sit around, shoot around with AirPods in, with no one else in the gym. Is just like the most comfortable place in the world for me. So, you did mention something, I think. And then I want to close this out with maybe an encouraging word that you would share outside of all the encouraging words and lessons you've shared so far. Is just, the question of whether it's transferable. I think the feeling that you felt, which I certainly felt, and I think a lot of people feel, is, man, was all this a waste? Like I just spent 15, 20 years getting really good at a thing, and now, now it doesn't matter, right? Now it doesn't matter. And I think one of the skill sets, I think it is a skill set. I think it's worthy of spending time on for athletes that are transitioning to sports or business, is trying to leverage those years, trying to leverage all that time that you put in. I mean, lessons learned is one thing, but also like getting a clear picture on like that story, like what was your story and what did it mean? And all the different things you went into, and you now being able to leverage, your career, and now you're coaching, right? And you're investing back into kids in the community, and look, call it like it is. There's synergies between, being a community guy and business, right? So you being involved in the high school sports scene, and you being a figure of having, your college athletic, like people are attracted to that. They're interested in that, right? If they're interested in basketball or college sports, they're going to be more likely to think that like, hey, Tamron, he's a pretty interesting guy. Like I really like him. He's sharp. So I don't know. There's just something about, it's more of a curiosity than a statement. I just think that there's something about, for me, that fires me up to say, man, I don't want all those years to be wasted. I don't want, I want to really leverage that story. I want to take that story and be able to translate it into what I'm doing now. I want to be able to call upon it. I want to be able to relate to the people I want to talk to. I want to really craft that narrative in a way that serves me. That it wasn't just like, I was this has been star basketball player that's, now an insurance agent, right? And that's just me, right? That's my own ego and my own battle of saying, but no, that's just, it's part of it. It was the previous chapter. Now I'm in the next chapter, but it's in the same book. So I don't know how you relate to that. I just wanted to come back to that because you said that, but at the same time, man, if you could give an encouraging word, and kind of wrap us up, I really appreciate your time, and I don't want to take too much of it.
Oh, you're fine, man. Well, I do want to touch on that because I think it does make sense. I had I wouldn't say he's a mentor of mine, but somebody that I just watch, Dr. Billy Williams. He always has a thing that he says. He says, "Success leaves clues." So I feel like for me, I was able to take all that basketball training and my mindset and my work ethic and formulate that into a professional basketball career. So at the least, it's like I didn't get to play as long as I wanted to, but that hard work, I at least saw that hard work does translate to reaching a goal. So I was successful in that in my basketball life, I would say, and transitioning into business. I want to have that same type of successful career. So I just look at it kind of like you, but I look at it more so I've been able to be successful in multiple facets and multiple chapters of life. So successful in the basketball chapter. Now I'm trying to write my new book in the business chapter and just kind of be successful every step. So that's how I kind of look at it and the transition part. But to leave some, I wouldn't say motivational, but some like knowledge, I would say for people listening, man, I think it just goes back to just your work ethic and understanding what you want out of your life. So for me, I wanted to be a professional basketball player. I did everything in my power to get to that level, and I was able to see myself get to that level, and I did. And now I want to put everything into being the best business owner I can be. I want to be the best leader in business I can possibly be, and that comes with the same type of work ethic, hard work, showing up every day. Same thing I had to do in basketball. It correlates so well to my business life. And I get to see people who have reached that point and are even still climbing, but they started from where I started. So like you and your brother and your other business partner, you all started scratch, super small, and you're able to build a true business. You're not just like I wouldn't call you all mom and pop, Main Street agency. You built a true business. And that's like the same type of trajectory that I see myself going on, the same vision I have for myself. So that would be my advice, is just get a vision and work tirelessly to get to that vision. And I think you'll be successful in whatever you choose.
Man, hard work translate. That's such a
Everywhere,
fire
man.
takeaway, man. And I know the people that listen to this, but the people that are around you every day, man, I know we're huge fans. You're creating more fans. I just love to see you win, and can't wait to continue to watch along the journey. And again, I'm super grateful. This was all. But I think you've helped so much for your time, dude. Have an awesome day, and let's not let it go too long until we do this again.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you, man.
All right, Tamron. See you, man.